Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back. It has been an amazing morning already, and we're just getting into it. I'm so excited about the performance we just witnessed by my good friend Kat McGill. And now we're about to get into this work, y'all. Before we start, I really want to take a moment. We acknowledged yesterday what is happening in the genocide in Palestine and all the other genocides that are happening across the planet as we speak. But today I want to do a little. I want to do a moment of silence for it, right? And so, very aware that there is a genocide that has been ongoing, happening in Palestine and in several other regions of the world. There are genocides happening. So, I want to take a brief moment of silence. We honor those who are fighting just to survive every day. We honor those who have lost their lives. We honor those who are dealing with unjust and horrific, unimaginable circumstances. And we also acknowledge the fact that being able to gather, to listen, to have internet, to think and argue and debate about concepts in the world and how things should be is a privilege, right? It's a necessary privilege, but this is a privilege that we get to be here today and not worry about our immediate safety. And so I just want to lift that up. We are about to get into our first panel. This is our movement panel. It is titled, I Believe That We Will Win, Fueling Our Work for 2024, because we know we got some work to do next year, y'all, and it is going to be a beast. And so I got some folks out there in the world that are actively organizing and trying to figure out how to strategize and make sure that conditions are better for all our people, right? So I'm going to bring up Liz Darius. She is a fierce organizer, movement worker, facilitator, and she's making magic happen in the world all the time. She comes and works with my groups all the time and educates them and makes sure that they are rooted in the histories and the understandings necessary to do the work that they are committed to doing in this world. And so I'm going to bring Liz Darius on and our fabulous panel of people to get to talk about this. All right. Hey, Liz, welcome.
Hi, y'all. Good morning. Good morning. Hi, Karishi. Always good to see you and be here with the Center for Third World Organizing, which is my motto for organizing when I was a little baby, getting trained up as an organizer in my early 20s. So thankful that you all are continuing to do the work and hosting now the second annual Living Liberation Conference. And thanks for bringing me back to facilitate, moderate this dope panel. I've been looking forward to this all week. And so, again, my name is Liz Darius, and I go by she or her, and I will be with us for the next hour and 15 minutes to host this panel titled, I Believe That We Will Win, Fueling Our Work for 2024. So thanks, Kairishi, again for calling attention and giving a moment of silence to our Palestinian kin from across the world who are experiencing the genocide and ethnic cleansing at the Zionist state of Israel at the hands of the Zionist state. So I'm totally loving the moment of silence. And I want to turn it up a bit for Palestine. I want to have our voices really, really heard around it, particularly because this is the day that across the nation, across the world, that's been titled and designated as the Shut It Down Day for Palestine. So many actions happening across the nation, across the world. We've seen the whole world in support of Palestine over these 30 plus days of siege. And I know that the leaders that are here on the panel today have been really significant in moving their organizations, moving their communities, to not only recognize what's happening in Palestine, but to recognize the connections of what's happening in Palestine are also happening in our communities here in the United States. So we'll spend time talking about that, because what else are we talking about if not fueling our work for 2024, which includes international solidarity and local action. So let me go ahead and introduce who we have with us today. I'm so excited to introduce my friend and comrade, Celeste Faison, who is the co-executive director with Movement for Black Lives. Celeste is a longtime organizing strategist, also trained as an organizer when she was in her little itty bitty years, has served with the director as the director with the League of Young Voters, has worked with Me Too, and has also worked with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And so long history. And welcome, Celeste. We're so happy to have you here. I'm going to do a round of introductions and then we'll move into the questions themselves. Also, so happy to see my friend and comrade Pokoya, who I've known for many years, just a remarkable organizer from the Bay Area, in the Bay Area, has worked with many young people, has worked with parents, was a director with Plan, and is now joining the Rising Majority as the new political director. And so excited to see all the work that you've been doing, Pokoya, across the Bay Area and across the nation to lead us. And welcome to my new friend, Lone. Very nice to see you, meet you here, Lone. Lone is also a longtime organizer, a migrant originally from Vietnam, who's currently organizing and living in North Carolina, with decades of organizing under their belt, working with migrants, LGBTQ people, communities of color, youth, and students, and is also working with Rising Majority. And I believe you are the executive director, co-director, big director, got a big D next to your name, Lone. And please add and correct anything that I may have said when we go around in questions, y'all. So let's hit it. I, again, am welcoming this particular panel that is going to help us to focus on fueling our work for 2024. So what we want to talk about, because you all have organizing backgrounds, because you all are strategists and have an eye on the nation, and what's happening across the nation, I want to spend some time talking about the immediate and long-term struggles that we're having in the moment, and really think about connecting those struggles that we're having locally to ones that are happening internationally, and really explore this question of winning. So we're always in struggle. We're always trying to figure out what's the next, policy, advocacy, organizing battle, radical change battle. But what does winning actually look like? How do we know we're getting there? What is it going to take? Who do we need to work with? Who's our partners? And then when we win, what do we do? Right? What do we do? So these are really kind of cross-cutting questions for folks on this panel. And we invite you all who, if you're watching, there's a document in which you can share your questions. We'll make some time for questions afterwards. But I'm going to pose this, and I'm going to, feel free to host it as a conversation. So if you feel really moved, like Lone said the dopest thing ever, and Celeste wants to feed off of that, please go ahead and make that happen. But I'm going to pose this question to you right now, Lone. We'll start with you. So working across the nation with multiple communities, you've seen multiple organizing struggles. If you could talk a little bit about what does winning look like for you in the immediate future? What does winning look like for you? How would you define?
Thanks, Liz, for the introductions and for the question. That's a big question in this moment, right? In the past month, we've seen Black for Palestine, we've seen Asians for Palestine, we've seen Students for Palestine. About Face Vets Against the War just did a press conference on the Hill with the squad to say veterans are for ceasefire. We've got labor unions, even if the big internationals and nationals aren't ready to take a position on Palestine or agitating from the bottom up. We're seeing, all sectors of society, both those who are already organized and inside of political organization, as well as just like everyday folks. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and just a few weeks ago, there was a Moms for Ceasefire event. And that event was like 150 parents and their children, right? And so we're at this moment where all the things that we thought were a little far off perhaps all the things that we thought were the ceiling are being agitated and pushed and are actually becoming the bar for entry. Right. Even just this public conversation that we are able to have about the genocide in Palestine in this moment as the result of 75 years of Israeli occupation and critically funded and supported by the United States government is a tremendous advance because the question of Palestine actually has always been allegedly this third rail, right? Even in progressive movements that we couldn't talk about it. And we have, even the comrades on this call, M4BL knows the consequence, right? Even though there should not be one, in taking a firm position and saying we are not going to separate ourselves from the Palestinian struggle. And so I've been incredibly in the midst of the rage and the grief and the anger, also just really energized to see the ways that we are able to keep open the political space to continue to push this conversation forward and also make sort of shape new kinds of demands, right? And so when I think about the window of time that we have sort of in the immediate and in the near term, there's something very concrete, which is this piece of ceasefire that Palestinians in Gaza need that. Period, right? If we are going to continue to build the momentum to address the bigger questions of occupation and of militarism, which doesn't just happen, in a place like Palestine, does not just happen in Sudan, it does not just happen in Haiti. It's happening here in the United States, and that's a lot of our work, right? Is to bring that reality, that political, cultural, social, economic reality to bear here in the United States where we're fighting. How do we, make our unions take positions that previously they were not able to make, right? How do we make our universities and our institutions and our media take positions that previously they were not able to make? I think there's an urgent fight in the next window of time to defend our folks, to defend the wins and advances that we've been able to make. But I think there's also this sort of less tangible feeling thing sometimes. But I've been studying a lot of what it means for us to keep open our imagination. And that's a lot of the work at the heart of Rising Majority and our long-term vision and strategy, is that there's all of these messages about where our folks are going to be that often don't include our people, right, as protagonists, as leaders in that. We're not the ones who get to determine that. And I think this window of time is really critical as more and more folks are seeing all of the cracks and all of the splits, that a major victory, is for us to actually continue to bring folks in and continue to build from the bottom up. And there's like a lot of other, work that we have to do. But I think right now it is a real fight and struggle for our collective imagination, our collective consciousness, and our ability to step in and make an intervention from whatever position in society we're in.
Yeah, thank you for laying that out, Lone, and making the connects for the work that you're doing to move everyday people in support of ending the ethnic cleansing and the genocide in Palestine. And it's good to hear that you understand that the people and the organizations across the nation that you're working with, that there's a particular time that we have now to really take advantage and move not just elected officials calling for a ceasefire, but to actually shift and change the dynamic and the paradigm around Palestine so that it isn't just organizations like M4BL who were advocating for their Palestinian people and comrades for years, alongside very deaf ears in the funder world and in the elected world. So thank you for Rising Majority for continuing to take that fight up as well. And I want to move it over to you, Pacoya. When you hear the words winning, what is it going to take to win in the short term? What does that mean for you?
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate your words, Lone, and analysis, because I think defining winning is such a amorphous kind of goal at this point, right? For those of us who've been in this work for multiple decades, there have been many moments when we thought, wow, this is the moment. This is it. This is when, the community is going to come together, when labor is going to join us, when those that we thought would never stand with us would, finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and say, yes, the movement is worth investment in, right? And I do think that we're seeing many of those elements starting to line up. We're starting to see folks' worldview shift to like, wait a minute, the same old, the status quo is actually not working for us, right? People are seeing the effects of corporations and their greed, their desire to keep people, basically in low wage jobs without affordable housing, without basic necessities being provided for, right? In a way that challenges, is everything okay? And that worldview shifting is a big part of our movement. We love those big actions. We love when folks are able to come out and stand in solidarity and call out the actions of our US government, call out the actions of other governments, right? But with the everyday actions that we actually need, it's the everyday people we need to also be able to say, hey, I think another world is possible. I think another reality is possible. And that's a win that we don't talk a lot about, right? I had the privilege of being with a daily team out, talking to voters on doors, calling folks every day, and hearing the response to questions around like, how is this moment impacting you? And folks having deep analysis in ways and sharing that analysis and being willing to engage in conversation is a win. Right? Folks being able to then say they want to take civic action, they actually want to find a toolkit, they want to figure out how to call their council person, figure out how to hold their representative accountable, figure out how to even make a call to Congress. I mean, many people over this last 2 weeks have taken action that they have never dreamed that they would do in their life. That's our win, right? We have people who are also doing the most amazing work. I want to shout out to all the parents who are in this moment trying to figure out how to explain this work, explain this moment to our next generation and engage them in honest, critical thinking so that they can really help to continue the world that we're trying to build. That is also a win. So it's those little small wins that we don't often highlight that are really important to our movement, really critical to the foundation of that world that we're fighting for, that world that we're envisioning, that world that we want to be true. It has to stand on a world view that actually supports the values we're fighting for, that actually sees the humanity of all across all of our nations, across all of our countries, across all of our cultures, our traditions, right? And really breaks apart the idea that these systems of oppression are actually good for us as a whole, right? Breaks apart the ideology that it's okay to just ignore 11,000+ bombs being dropped on Gaza, right? There are things that are inhumane that have to be called out. And for the first time, I really do see people begin to grapple with the inhumane components of our systems of oppression. It's inhumane to bomb. It's inhumane to do war, period, right? And though we've been saying that for decades, almost hundreds of years, if we're being honest with ourselves, this is a moment where folks are not able to ignore it, and they're being forced to really see those areas where they have to develop their own political analysis, where they have to open up to having hard conversations within their friends, their families. And I think that this moment is going to fuel a very different conversation for years to come around how we then drive the policies we need. We need affordable housing. We have too many individuals who have no capacity to have just a basic roof over their head in the midst of the most dramatic climate changes in our world, right? We have a lot of our community pushing for crime and punishment at a time when we know the decades that we've survived are no longer the things that are going to work for our community. Locking people up and throwing away the key is not the way to resolve things, right? And we also have folks who are really struggling to work 2 and 3 jobs to just survive, to be able to hit all of these dynamics. And so it's important for us in this moment, and I'll wrap up, to not only see those connections to Gaza, but to other struggles across the world. What's going on in the Congo is also something I want to raise attention to as well. And I think that these are the opportunities where the win for me is to get those everyday conversations to continue to happen, but also that then connects us to what are we really fighting for? Basic things, right? Basic necessities we need to exist in our world, our human rights, our human dignity, being centered in our policies and our systems of government being functionally based on giving us those things.
Thank you, Pokoya. You have consistently been working alongside, shoulder to shoulder with, again, students, parents, families, communities, and through Coleman Advocates work, through PLAN, and now through Oakland Rising. I apologize, I said rising majority, but hell, we're all rising. So thank you again for giving us that piece, and particularly connecting that what is an immediate win, what organizers at their heart strive to do is to bring community together to change our conditions. And so then to push people every day to take their voter guides, to knock on doors, to make the connections in their head, to call their representatives, that these are immediate wins for you. And scaling them up is the work that you're doing and the work that Oakland Rising is doing in a multi-collaborative, multinational, multilingual way. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And Celeste, I want to call on you. So you have, again, been also in this work for quite a while and have seen maybe many wins, many challenges, many victories, many losses. What does winning look like for you for the immediate?
Thanks for the question, comrade. So, like my other comrades on the call, I've been in the movement for a long time. And I think when I was younger, I used to, one, think that the revolution was going to happen in our lifetime, and that in order for it to happen, the walls of Jericho were all going to fall down at the same time. And now I think of it more as like a really slow domino setup where you hit the first domino and everything kind of falls little by little by little. But in order to do that, I think an immediate win for me is us having an infrastructure. Let's build the dominoes, y'all. Let's build the plan. Let's build the people who are the dominoes that are toppling these structures, right? And so an immediate win for me is, one, people being agitated, people being activated, people being moved into action, and then people being moved into organization. And that could be formal or informal organizations, formations, bodies of people, people in a corner, whatever, that are exerting a plan towards building and moving power. And what we see right now is that the right, and even those who out-organize us with resources that are on our side, that out-organize us because they have more resources and infrastructure, that's why they're able to do that. And if we really want to catch up, if we really want to seize and have power, we're going to have to build the infrastructure for our movement to be able to do that, person by person, base building by base building, narrative by narrative. And then I think the other piece that is necessary for us to win is for us to, while I think it's Cabron that says claim no easy victories, we do need to set up victories for our folks, right? And so that means lots of time we think, I was talking to Lone about this the other day, and Lone was like, we think of winning in absolutes, that it's all or nothing. And one thing that Lone said that resonated with me, which is, what's the harm reduction? What are the incremental wins that have our people know that building power is possible? And that advances us to our larger wins, right? And so And that doesn't mean that those wins have to sacrifice our values in any way, but we need to understand that winning is incremental. And so I think winning right now means taking time to, especially for where we are moving for Black lives, where we spent the first 10 years building a lot of infrastructure to support the um, growing, budding, and very resilient Black liberation movement. For us, winning, we're thinking about infrastructure building and creating real pathways to power that allow us for different levels of victories.
For bringing in the analysis again. At our core, we are organizers. We bring people in, we agitate them, we develop their thinking, we pull out the genius that they have, we bring them into organization, and we build organization in order to build power. That is the core formula of our work, right? And so consistently coming back to base building to be able to grow the numbers of people on our side. So thanks for raising that up. So let's kind of segue, y'all. We have people on our side, right? The numbers of people across the world now that are not only standing up for Palestine, but are taking action to shut down the arms dealers, to shut down the corporations, to shut down businesses, to stop boats. The Arab Resource and Organizing Center, shout out to them, who docked the boat in the Bay Area the other day. All of these direct actions across the world, we're seeing people on our side. And we're also watching our folks call their electeds and call their representatives without the response that we're anticipating, without the response that we need. We saw just yesterday, Congress censured Representative Rashida Tlaib. We saw that Congress people, staff members were on the steps saying, we can't take this anymore. We are naming and claiming that the many residents that are calling us to call for a ceasefire, an end to the genocide, is being felt on, it's landing on deaf ears with our electeds. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I imagine you see that in your day-to-day work as well. We get people on our side. We are on the right side of history. But what is getting in the way of us being able to advance our campaigns for freedom and liberation? Let's really break this down like scientists, because organizers are scientists. What is getting in the way of our freedom and our liberation? Is it our electeds? Are we not growing enough? Is our infrastructure faulty? Let's talk about this, y'all. So I'm going to start with you, Pokoya.
I had a feeling you were coming to me first. I think, one of the things that I've been grappling with over here at Oakland Rising Action, is just, what does it mean to have governing power, right? To have the progressive electeds be folks who are carrying our values and ideally pushing our values into policies, right? And as I'm watching across not just the Bay Area, but across the state of California, folks grapple with this moment, right? Of like, okay, I am a progressive and I sit in these, elected positions, but I'm not a majority. I'm a minority of a voice, often on a city council or in a school board or whatever structure we can look at. And I think there are just really deep concerns as electeds of this moment of how to take the positions that are values led while also not having actual majority governing power, and the political consequences of that, in the sense of like, what does this mean in this moment? If I put this resolution forward and I don't get the votes and I am up for election next year or this year, right? And I think folks are struggling with this moment, right? Of like, what does power look like? How do you assert it? How do you connect the governing power that we really are working toward, building the political infrastructure toward, with actual power building and base building, right? And there is this moment that we have to sit both in uncomfortableness of like, we might not get those yes votes across all of the boards and all of the councils and all of the things that we want, because we don't actually have majority power on those boards, those commissions, those councils. But how do we stand in solidarity with our electeds, particularly ones who are willing to introduce ceasefire resolutions, ceasefire policies, statements of support and solidarity? How do we stand with them and create the base building support that gives them that courage, right, to take those types of hits, right? And then how do we prepare for an electoral year where there will be blowback, particularly from the conservative base, right? How are we looking at our long-term strategy of if this moment inherently continues to build the conservative base to take and assert their voting power, right? Those are things that are happening here in the Bay as we see people getting put on recalls that are fueled by conservative voters, conservative donors, right? We have this moment where we're really needing to analyze this both in the short term and the long term. Not to say that any action is wrong or right, but there are, as we know in organizing, unintended consequences for the positions that we take. I'm in the camp of let's take those positions, but let's do them strategically, let's do them thoughtfully, let's do them courageously, and also let's plan, right, for what we know is coming in 2024 with the conservative pushback.
The thread that continues even from connecting what Celeste was offering is the importance of infrastructure, the importance of governance, the importance of being strategic when we take actions, the importance of supporting those elected officials that take action on the right side of history. How do we also show up for them? So thanks for sharing that, Pokoya. I'm going to ask you, Lone, when you are working with Rising Majority, right, across the country, to call and demand on issues that relate to liberation and freedom, what is getting in the way? What are the things that actually are getting in the way that we can call and name and change?
Thanks for the question, and thanks, Pokoya, for opening and really making the points on this question of power and specifically governing power. And I wanna play off of that a little bit, because I think that that's at the heart of this, right? It matters that we have people on our side, and it matters that we're on the correct side of history. But that list of the conditions of what's required for us to be successful is so much longer than those two really critical, right? Because we need to see ourselves in context of history and what's come before. And we also need to be facing society. We need to be where people are, right? In their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces. And we need power, and we need different forms of power, right? The governing power piece is really critical. We're seeing it now that this has been, our opposition has made a very accurate assessment of us, that for a long time we have refused to contend for that form of power, particularly through the electoral arena. And so that's where they have doubled down in their strategy, right? That's where they've doubled down in the infrastructure, in the capital, in the resources, in the staffing, in the organizing. And I feel very heartened by the ways that, particularly in my sort of universe, Rising Majority, member organizations and our partners are all formations that have very clear political lines. Right. We are staunchly anti-racist. We are staunchly anti-capitalist. We are pro-feminist. We are pro-Palestine. We're all of these wonderful, beautiful, incredible, critical things. But for a long time, our ecosystem of organizations really struggled with what it meant to have a strategic orientation to elections and electoral organizing versus just like, I don't like these people. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm going to sit it out. Right? I was about to cuss. So I went a different direction. Y'all saw it on my face, but, and it took us a long time to sort of actually really genuinely struggle with each other and build a different kind of muscle, to be able to recognize that if we aren't really serious about what it means to govern, then the platforms that we have, the visions that we have for our people, are going to be a little limited. Right. So that's one piece. And then I think there's other forms of power that we need to talk about. The question of economic power, right? What is the role of both traditionally organized labor as well as unorganized labor, as well as new kinds of labor, right? The work that, Celeste and others were doing at NDWA, a lot of that was about making sure that folks really understood who was making our economy move, right? And that it's actually deeply racialized and highly gendered labor. It's care work, it's domestic work, right? There's no, at least among organizers, there should be no surprise that like healthcare workers and educators have been on the front lines of questioning the widely accepted sort of underappreciation of those sectors of the economy. And then there's also the question of culture and narrative power, right? What's it mean to actually build the infrastructure, the capacity to not just engage in politics, but to actually shape it? And then I think much deeper than that, to be able to influence and shape people's sense of self, as well as their sense of belonging to others, right? What we are up against is just like a deeply sophisticated propaganda machine, right? That says in order for you to be good, other people have to not be good, right? In order for you to be successful, other people actually have to fail. We know those things are false. And there are thousands of messages that our people receive every single day, attempting to pull them in, right, into that illusion, into that propaganda. And then there's this question of organizing power. And I think that's the piece that, Liz, you spoke to earlier, just around this question of base building, right? That we actually have to talk with folks. And we actually have to be able to sit with the fact that our people are full of contradictions, that our folks are not monolithic by any stretch of the imagination, and that we can't always assume unity around some of even our most basic demands if we're not actually with our people, right? I'm not sure what happened, but somewhere along the way, I think we became more sort of inward facing and movement facing and activist facing than we were mass facing and society facing, right? And what I mean by that is that we have underdeveloped this muscle of being comfortable sitting with the complexity of our own people, and sitting inside of this deep, rigorous hope that actually everyone can be transformed, right? But it's going to require work. And so all of those, right, we have to figure out how to make it work coherently. And so to actually answer the question about what I think is getting in the way, is that we largely don't have a strategy. Our formations, our movements don't usually move from even a strategic framework that says, no matter what we take up, this has to be our orientation. Right? We have to be building towards a vision. We have to do it in a particular way, and we have to be thoughtful and mindful about what we do in the first phase that sets the conditions correct for the phases to come. And that kind of strategy is very different than what a lot of us are used to around campaign strategies, right? That say, here are the 5 targets over the next 6 months. Here are the folks we're going to talk to. This is the, comms piece of it. This is, what we're trying to push through. We still need that. But it's only one part of the puzzle. And I think it's I think this moment in particular is really revealing, and at least for me, as part of a lot of the grief, is that we do not have the power that we need to actually force the US government to do the thing that we know it needs to do. And so we're doing the things we know how to do. We're doing all of them, and all of it matters. And we should continue to do that until we win a ceasefire demand, so that folks can advance into what comes after that. But that's the sober reality that we're sitting inside of. And I would say that that is the result of us not operating through a shared power building strategy, right? That really, at the heart of it, a power building strategy is building our capacity to make things happen. And on the scale of the different kinds of things that we can make happen, we may be able to make happen, and we often do, getting thousands of people into the streets. We don't yet quite have the capacity to make happen a form of governance that really is about multiracial working class people having decision-making ability over every aspect of their lives, right? And we need that full spectrum. But we're a little skewed to one side of it now. And we've got to figure out in moments like this, how do we take a moment even to say, hey, what's the situational strategy? How do we forecast the various kinds of scenarios? How do we develop a division of labor? How do we be better coordinated, right, to those infrastructure pieces? And all of that's to say, we cannot underestimate the systems that we're up against that are sophisticated, that adapt. We've seen the ways that our movements have been captured, co-opted, commodified, monetized. So I by no means want to like underestimate the role of just white supremacist capitalism and patriarchy. But I also don't want us to understate perhaps some of the ways that we have not paid attention to some of these bigger questions around power and strategy.
Thank you, Lone. And we were all feeling you in that moment when you were about to curse. We were about to curse with you. So thank you for that. And speaking truth to power. So you're naming a lot of the analysis that Rising Majorities put out, that other organizations in your ecosystem have put out, is that we are at a lack of really contending with state power, right? Building dual power, building strategies that actually have infrastructure where we can govern and make decisions for ourselves. So that's been a big challenge. And I appreciated the way that you kind of laid that out, in that we've skewed our analysis, maybe our energy over arguably the last decade, in looking at movement, looking at activists, and looking really internal when we should be looking at mass engagement. So really good analysis there. And I want to pick the conversation up with you, Celeste, as now you've been in a lot of different formations, ones that have organized, that have base built, ones that come out of direct action, ones now that as you're building an organization, Movement for Black Lives, that has consistently stayed on the right side of the Palestine question. What do you think it's actually going to take to advance our campaigns for freedom and liberation?
So thanks for this question. Myself and my co-director, M. Adams, are in constant debate, and it's one of our favorite topics. And so I'll say this. One, it's hard to go after Lone because I think Lone hit all of the points. But I'll try to see what's left on the table. One thing that Lone spoke to that I just want to double tap on is our ability to utilize co-governance models, right? Co-governance models. And so our electoral justice project, led by Kayla Reed from St. Louis, and who runs St. Louis Action, and Rukia Lumumba, of a wonderful family, an incredible activist and lawyer in her own right, are really thinking about how do we practice co-governance. So not just engaging in electoral politics, but being able to leverage that to make those electeds that we put in office work to push our agenda. I think there's some really good models around that we should scale up. So for instance, our member organization, EAT, led by Rich in Chicago, worked really hard to get Brandon elected as mayor in Chicago. It was a really powerful victory. And getting him elected wasn't about him being a figurehead, but understanding that he had a commitment to move the agenda forward. So last night, he put a recommendation in the budget for funding a new commission on restoration and reparations, and that he'll work with the Black Alderman Caucus to get it done. And that is a victory actually for Eat Chicago, and for all our working reparations group within our policy work, right? Within our policy table, we have a whole table of organizations working towards reparation with not just, it's different than saying, oh, we have a target, we're going to demand this, but choosing through a co-governance strategy of like, who gets to govern and making sure that that governance is accountable to the will of our people, right? And so Brandon is a really good example of that, and some more, and we need to be thinking more about those kinds of models in order to be able to win. And if we approach electoral politics in a different way, in a more traditional way, we'll rob ourselves of the opportunity to advance and actually co-govern. The second thing that I think is really important here is dual power, which is a little bit different than co-governance. And I think really, really important when we think about standing up alternatives for our people. So if we say defund the police, right? There's a question here that we have to genuinely answer is how do we deal with harm coming from the state and intercommunal violence, right? And what does dual power look like? What does it look like for us as a movement to deeply invest in experimenting and standing up the alternatives, right? As a way for our folks to be able to have that as a service and interact and actually touch what the alternative looks like so they have less reliance on the systems that exist, right? And so within M4BL, we have this table of organizations called Abolishing Patriarchal Violence. And they're building community safety pods in several cities around the country to explore this idea of what does safety look like for Black women? What is an alternative? And if you think about Spirit House in North Carolina, that's thinking about what is an alternative for mediation to intercommunal violence, um, and they're setting up systems. And there's some systems in Oakland too that I remember with parents, like even in simple stuff of like being able to be with the kids after school instead of the policing folks after school, like little stuff like that. Like, how do we stand up those alternatives and make them owned by the community, right? Dual power. How do we force people to make a choice around which system they want to be governed by, and have those be the systems that we collect together? So that's something else that we as a movement haven't spent enough time investing in those kinds of strategies. We, Mo always says it's not enough to state the problem. We have to show that we can create the solution. And we're in a critical time where we see people opening up and being agitated, and they want to see those solutions. And if we do not create those solutions and engage with them in creating those solutions, then we'll miss out on a really wonderful opportunity for some fundamental transformative change to happen. And then the other barriers that we just can't not state are the external factors, right? Of what we're up against, right? What the landscape looks like. And so I'll just go through them like really, really quickly. Is one, we're facing a crisis in democracy. We have parts of a whole party set on making it hard to govern, right? Part of that is they're making that hard making it hard to govern by leaning towards authoritarianism, creating crisis in democracy through voter suppression. We see them intentionally dismantling trust in democracy. And we see Republicans moving the poll extremely far right. And the response of that are Democrats moving right of center in response instead of holding that. And so then you see the country's politics leans towards appeal, towards trying to capture the right instead of moving our values towards left, right? And who gets sacrificed in that are Black, brown, working class folks, right? And so that's one of the other conditions that's growing. And ungrounded populist movements like MAGA are also impacting that. And then another external factor that's really getting in the way is corporations, right? And that's in two ways. So corporate control of our governance structures. So that's one way. And them being able to influence elections and really move when we think about the climate crisis. It's a negotiation with corporations around how much money they'll be able to make this year, less about saving the environments, which is why we get to places like an IRA that has a lot of false solutions, right? And so we have to contend with this question of corporate control. And then the other piece is that we have to have corporations, we have to call for the divestments of corporations in our governments and influencing our city budgets. And then the last piece is that one thing that we see is that capitalism will answer the calls of social justice in order to protect itself, right? And so, we see it every Pride Month, right? We got Juneteenth ice cream in Walmart, right? So these things that feel like tangible wins, and our people are like, we're advancing. And this is why us creating our own alternatives and victories for people to feel in touch is really important, because we have to contend with the fact that capitalism and corporations are creating the victories for us and could pacify the folks that are agitated towards change. And so it's really important to answer this question around corporate interference and corporate accountability as well. So just wanted to raise those external factors in as a add-on to Loan's wonderful and the way Loan analyzed our internal factors.
Yes, I'm taking a deep breath on that one, because I think that what you're really speaking is true to what you offered and brought into the space from Cabral Celeste, is that we tell no lies and we claim no easy victories, right? So we have to be very thoughtful about who it is that we are calling to task, and not only in ourselves, our organizations, but our elected officials and beyond. And so I'm really going to run with this idea that you all have kind of more or less been talking about, which is being able to contend for power, right? And if you are a nerd who likes to read nerdy things like me, I go back and often read stuff around the state, and particularly from Lenin, and thinking about that every revolutionary, Lenin wrote this piece about contending for state power, for dual power, and that the basic question for every revolutionary is, how do we build up to state power, right? So I like this picture that you're kind of painting, Celeste, particularly as the external forces are closing in on us, right? The rise of armed white nationalists, the rise of people who believe in the ideology of fascism, the rise of Trump followers, as some of the maybe more stark things that we can see. But what you're also offering is that the Democrats don't always, they tail behind that they try and catch up, right? To where the right really is, instead of holding their own, instead of being able to actually contend. So for us, as radicals, as revolutionaries, we take advantage of those moments. When there is a shakeup in the state, right? And we did it 10 years ago. That's how much of the work around Black Lives Matter started to pop off. And we can arguably say that there's a shakeup in the state, there's a shakeup in the faith that people have in this particular government right in this moment. It is a favorable moment when we are seeing people on the street for Palestine, right? In the hundreds of thousands, the largest march in front of Washington's White House the other day, 300,000 for Palestine, right? So you can arguably say that the current period is drawing in the hearts and minds of people to stand up against genocide and ethnic cleansing, against the backdrop of the Zionist state, right? So we have to take advantage of that, right? This is our key challenge facing us, is how do we kind of convert the explosion that's happening a decade ago, that happened on the streets, in order to really engage people and bring them into organizations where we can create alternatives, right? How do we draw people in from the street into our organizations? So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that, again, because we got to tell the truth, y'all. We can't tell no lies, right? Are our organizations poised to win? Are they poised internally, our infrastructure, our co-leadership models, our governance models, our the culture in our organizations? Are they poised to win, to take advantage of what's happening on the street now, to really draw people in, to build state power for the long term? And if not, what are we doing to get our organizations ready to win? I'm going to let the spirit call on whoever in this moment. You had it, Celeste.
No, go ahead,
There we
Celeste.
go.
Okay. So, on a spiritual scale, are we poised to win? Yes. Are Black people resilient, and we have the power to change the conditions for everyone? When folks and the Black folks, yes. Do we need to build the infrastructure and a better understanding of I don't want to say no, we're not poised to win, but I say right? At what level, at what scale, at what time, for what purpose, for how long, right? We have to answer those questions. And the reason why I just want to push back, don't get that specific, then we'll feel hopeless. Like we'll never get to that point. But there's some places here where we can make a big impact. One, when we're thinking about the congressional elections coming up in 2024, the presidential elections, we can be poised to win. And that doesn't mean getting a Democrat in office. That means having the folks, building relationships for the purpose of future co-governance, accountable relationships on a municipal, state, and then maybe even the federal scale, right? So yeah, we're poised to win there if we approach organizing with that level of some work to do to really clarify what our strategies are, and then to move towards these two frames that I've offered, which is co-governance and dual power. And at M4BL, that's the work that we're up to doing, is really developing the understanding of our members to be able to engage in a collective conversation, collective debate, and collective strategy around what it takes to do that as an ecosystem. So yeah, we're poised, we're ready, we're excited, but we will not also overestimate our power, right? And I think that that's really important. When I think about the genocide that's happening in Palestine, it's really evident that there are areas in which we are completely not poised to win. And we have a lot of work to do, right? But that doesn't mean that it's not possible. So I'll stop there and I'll just pick somebody. I'm just going to pick Pacolia.
Yeah, I think this is a really important moment of truth telling in our movement, right? Of not only acknowledging where we don't have power, but also acknowledging where our infrastructure has to be strengthened for us to hold the kind of power we want over time. And to Celeste's earlier point around like building the domino, right? And building that infrastructure so that people can be a part of that domino effect. That is critical at this moment, right? And it's often the least amount of work that people want to put in. We have to be in the community. We have to have those hard conversations with folks, right? We have to be able to hold space when folks don't agree with us. We have to be able to hold space when people don't understand the systems of oppression that they're operating within, right? And I find that people are often in our movement uncomfortable with that place of uncomfortableness, right? That it's easier to just kind of show up at the rallies and the protests, but not go out in the community and do the door knocking, not out be on the phones with folks, not have that conversation with our neighbors, not have those conversations with our families, right? And I want to lead with that because I think that until we're there, until we're really truthfully honest about the importance of the base building, the foundation of all of those components of our power that we need is that the people are with us. To have the people with us, not only do we have to improve our narrative and our ability to kind of tell the stories that we're experiencing, to be able to invest in the programs and the services and the alternatives that we care about, we also have to be able to tell the stories of where our movement is failing people, not able to offer those alternatives right now to folks, not able to deal with the fact, like here in Oakland, we have high rates of violence. I had a beautiful outreach team out ducking and dodging on bullets, right? That is the reality and the conditions that we are dealing with. And as our movement, we have to be able to acknowledge we don't have the solution for how to stop those things that harm, right? We don't have the solutions in our hands right now because we don't have that governing power. We don't have that ability to control the budgets that make those investments that we care about and those alternatives real. So I do think I'm sitting in that space of like, how do I strengthen my own analysis as an organizer of this moment? What is my responsibility to build that analysis within myself? What is my responsibility to build my toolkit? How do I hold space for folks to argue with me? How do I hold space for organizers to argue with me and push back against me? But also, as a political director, say we still have to move forward in these ways. We have to still hold this space together and come to that strategy conversation with open arms to embrace all the possibilities. And it's not the easiest space to be in. It's not the easiest space to embrace, but it's a space that we have to sit with to encourage, right? And I lean back on this in this moment to that particular value, primarily because it's not easy to hear people say, I actually want Israel to win. That is probably the hardest moments for me in my work right now, is to hear folks in complete opposition to the values that I hold, right? Folks who are, propaganda embracing. This is my new way of saying things, right? And I just have to hold space of love for them, to know that they are just in a moment right now where they can't see all if outside of that propaganda machine that they get indoctrinated in on a daily basis, right? So then what is my role? That person, that light, that helps to bring them closer and more on that long-term path toward us. And how do I support our organizations? How do I support our organizers? How do I support our movement to not give up on that individual, right? Because it's those individuals that we give up on that often have the brightest ability to be our leaders, the brightest ability to be our block captains when we need to go and move our electoral strategy, when we need to be able to move our civic engagement process. And so I'm learning a lot in this moment about the gentle push around agitation, the actual holding of safe space for individuals, and the actual processes we need to be able to really be honest within our strategy, but also how we need to push to ensure that we actually stay in that honesty and take action at the same time. And that's the hardest work to do amongst organizers, because we all believe we have the solutions. We know the moment right now. We got to take the action. We can launch this campaign, and it is difficult in this moment to not just want to launch a campaign to launch a campaign, right? It is difficult in this moment to ask the question of, is this in alignment with a long-term agenda, right? Are we contending with the alignment, or are we just trying to do busybody work and avoid those hard questions that Lone offered for us earlier around what forms of power are we really building and toward what agenda, right? And I do find that is the space that I'm sitting. I think we're all kind of sitting in this moment in different ways and at different levels of our movement. And I think it's an invitation to continue to sit with it and to continue to invest in ourselves, to not shy away from this moment. Because our leaders before us never shied away from their moments. And it's because of their bravery, it's because of them not shying away that we have some of the best literature, some of the best political education possible, and some of the best strategy to look back on and improve and build on. We never stand alone. We always stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And we have to prepare for the next generation to be able to stand on ours.
Thank you, Bukoya. Lone, is there anything you wanted to add? You came off mute about a few minutes ago.
Oh no, that was me just egging Celeste on. Yeah, I mean, I think that what folks have shared is spot on, you know, and I mean, I think about Lenin, I think about Vietnam, where my people are from, I think about national liberation struggles. And I think about, Vietnam defeated the French and then had to turn right around and defeat the US. And so we do win. We have victories, and they've not been easy victories, right? And I think so that spirit remains, and I think that we should be guided by that spirit. I wouldn't be here. Vietnam wouldn't be here if it weren't for what my people did multiple times against multiple colonizers, against multiple occupiers. And what you were raising, Liz, in your comments earlier, I think, you know, this piece around like what it means to contend. And I think contending means that we actually have to lead, that we actually have to take the question of leadership very, very seriously. In order for us to contend, we have to be really clear about under which banner, what sets of interests we are aligning ourselves with, we are putting out there, we are amplifying. And I think that question in particular is very live right now as we look at, as what Celeste called the crisis of democracy, which is a crisis of legitimacy, right? It is a crisis of legitimacy that this system is under, because all of the mechanisms, all of the institutions that have been constructed to convince regular, everyday people that this is how it's supposed to go is actually crumbling. Folks are not buying into it. And yet are not being presented with the alternatives at a pace that matches it. And so what question then does that pose to us as radicals, as organizers, as social movements is, are we going to step in and lead? Right? That the united front that exists between, the Democratic Party, neoliberals, these mainstream forces who we know in moments like this, when they talk about democracy, they're not talking about a working class democracy. They're not talking about a Black, Brown, Indigenous democracy. They're talking about status quo. They want to preserve that. So then how do we lead with eyes wide open, make the truth be known to our people, right? That we are not aligned with that ultimate strategic objective that these forces are setting up. But we also have to be very clear to both not overestimate our power and not underestimate our opposition, right? And I think that's the piece that's very challenging right now, especially in the past month when, and now I'm going to cuss because I think we're getting towards the end. Because a lot of us are like, fuck Biden, and rightfully so, right? But there's a strategic calculation that we have to make in terms of where are we going to lead our folks? Where are we going to position our people to be able to take up the much longer term fight of defeating fascism and authoritarianism? And that, even if we don't want it to be, is part of objective reality about the tasks that we have to take up in the next year, right? That we better figure out how to out-organize the neoliberals while being within a united front with those forces, so that we can actually confront our far right opposition, right? Who has every interest in making sure that convenings like this don't happen, right? And so not trying to be like alarmist about it, but really trying to lean into what are the honest questions we need to be grappling with right now, and what are the choices that we actually have to be called on if we actually want to lead our people.
Yeah, and thanks, Sloan. I'll just add that what will have us poised to lead is that we're not answering those questions in a vacuum, but that we're doing that in coalition and in mass. And so I think what's really special about all three of our organizations is that we do that. So M4BL is an ecosystem of close to 200 Black-led organizations. Rising Majority is an ecosystem of how many I have no idea, but it's a lot of organizations and we're part of it, right? Oakland Rising, and I remember when Oakland Rising started, has a component that's a coalition of lots of different organizations that are setting the political agenda for Oakland together. And then there are other models around the country that follows like Oakland Rising, right? In other places. And so our ability to answer these questions together, to build united front, to build coalition spaces will help us be better positioned. But if we continue to formulate these solutions piecemeal way, without considering what the scale required and the level of coordination and cohere and the amount that we need to be cohered, we will not have the ability. So if we are examples of what it takes to be poised to win on this call, slowly but surely, it is possible because our organizations are embody that mission.
Yeah, right on to all of you for kind of sharing with us what it is that we need to be doing in preparation to actually build power for the long term and to win for the long term, and really analyzing for yourselves what are the alternatives and how do we think about those alternatives in a strategic and timely way. Because we've seen over and over the Democratic Party has failed us, continues to fail us. You know, let the curse word rip, right, around Biden. And these are part and parcel to actually building dual power, right, y'all? Like analyzing that the source of power that we build is not actually something we've previously seen. It's not what it is right now. It's something that we have to build from the bottom up, right? That also includes replacing the police, the army, and all militarized forms of rule in our country and across the world. And then thirdly, actually creating what we mean by democracy, right? So Celeste was offering that the idea of democracy is co-opted. And for us, shifting our understanding of democracy so that it doesn't just hold a privileged number of people. We're not recreating a bourgeois democracy. We're actually creating a democracy from the bottom up. And all of these require us to think about alternatives, right? To build dual power, you actually need something else. You need an alternative. So I want to focus on this question because we have just a few minutes left, is that, you know, we can get real meta, right? Like this big and that big and this big, but I want to bring it down to ourselves, right? And do a little bit of story sharing. And I'm curious with you all, what is it that you are doing to prepare yourselves for the win? Right. So Pokoya was talking about really needing to contend and listen to people when they are in an alternative space than we are. Then when they are saying we want Israel to win, holding space for that, right? Lone offering the experience of being from Vietnam and seeing the forces that Vietnam had to defeat over and over, and that you are a product of that, right? Celeste offering the space in which you've had to really think about moving from being an organizer to thinking strategically across the nation with multiple forces, right? So what is it that you do and are needing to do, continue to do, want to do, to build yourselves up as leaders for the win? I think I want to start with you, Lone.
Thanks. So there's this great documentary about the playwright and activist artist Lorraine Hansberry called Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart. And, you know, she, her sort of claim to fame, which I hate that phrase, but how she became known was through the play that she wrote, Raisin in the Sun. And it took her it took a long time for that play to get an audience and get a stage, because she was ahead of her time in many ways in terms of writing a play where all of the protagonists were Black people. And what was interesting about her story was that, you know, she wrote this play, and then she actually got really, she got a little bored with it, would be how she described it, right? Because it had taken her, the sort of the fame and the attention took her away from some of the other work that she had been doing. And she started making these lists in her journal. And if you watch the documentary, you can see it. She's making these lists of like, here's all of the experiences that she's sort of like done with. And here are the things that she wants. And that list was actually very short. On the list, the first 2 points, she says, I want 1, to work, and 2, to be in love. And I actually have that tattooed on me because I think about it a lot in terms of what it means for all of us to be committed to this work. That is our life's work, that is our heart's work. That's not work in the sense of, here's this job that I have and I'm gonna clock in and do this thing that I need to do. But here is how I'm going to contribute the labor, which makes all things possible. Right. And whether that labor is organizing a meeting, whether that labor is writing a poem, whether that labor is moderating a panel, right? How do I do that work? And how do I be consistent and diligent in that? And then the second piece, to be in love. That we have to do this work from a deep, deep, deep well of love for ourselves and for our people. And so those are my sort of 2 pieces where I'm like, let me do my work and let me love myself and love my people, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. That's beautiful for sharing that. Okoya, what is it that you're doing to prepare yourself for the win?
So I'm a mom of 3, and 21, 13, and 8, and wide range, y'all, wide range. And so I found myself wondering, when we win, what's the traditions, what's the culture, what's the day-to-day living look like, right? And what's my responsibility and the responsibility of all of us who are parenting, organizing, activating, agitating? What's our responsibility right now? Like, what do we have to seed in this moment in order for, by the time we win, that culture, that tradition, that way of living to actually be the alternative that we believe in, right? So I've been sitting with that and inviting myself to listen to the 8-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 21-year-old and their perspective on that, right? On like, well, like my 8-year-old the other day was like, I don't really know what Palestinian culture is. And I was like, I appreciate you being honest. I was like, in the world I'm fighting for, you would know that. So what do I need to do as a parent to ensure that you have access to embracing that culture, right? So that it's not a other culture, but it's a culture you are aware of, right? And here in the Bay Area, we have the privilege that other folks, not honestly across the country, may not have. We can go to a Palestinian restaurant. We can call up friends who are Palestinian, right? And so I'm really investing in challenging myself as a parent, as an organizer, to focus in on the culture piece, right? Focus in on the traditions, focus in on educating myself and breaking down this is just the American way of doing things, right? And actually pushing beyond my boundaries and saying, well, what's the Palestinian way of doing things, right? What's the tradition and the worldview that they hold? And how's that similar to mine? Where are there differences and what's okay with those differences, right? And fostering the ability of our family to not only embrace those differences, but also be comfortable with the fact that there will be lots of differences in our cultures and our traditions across the world. And our ancestors were okay with that. They lived with that. They contended with that. They didn't bomb each other because of that. They didn't start wars with each other because of that, right? Because the world I'm fighting for, the world I think we're all fighting for, is a world where we have radical acceptance of each other. And so I'm sitting in that space of what's my responsibility every day to foster radical acceptance of everyone's culture, everyone's traditions, so that I'm showing up in the best way possible, respecting everyone's worldview.
Thanks for that, Pokoya, and for the loving questions from your children. Okay, Celeste, we'll take just the last minute to see what it is that you're doing to prepare yourself, and then we'll give thanks and close out.
This is a good question, and I'm definitely always searching to answer it, and it shifts at different times. And so I'd say, like, in this moment, I'm thinking about what's my commitment beyond the nonprofit structure, um, to build infrastructures and formations that bring change. And how, and as a incoming ED, how do I ensure that within the nonprofit structures that we are really that we're preparing and seeding a field that doesn't rely on the existence of our organization to move forward. And that's really important to me, and something that I'm just in deep thought about pretty often. And then I also think about Mary Hook's mandate for Black lives. And I think it's to revenge the suffering of our ancestors, to gain the respect of future generations, and to be transformed in the work. And so I think about Mary Hooks, who we get to have on our staff as our labs co-director, and does amazing organizing around the country, and Atlanta's leading a lot of Cop City work with our member organization, Community Movement Builders, and other formations down there. So shout out to Mary for giving us that frame. But I think about a lot around what does it mean to be transformed in the work, and to know that to set myself up and the organizations that I get to be a part of, to not only gain the respect of future generations, but be able to say, this is what we build, and now we're passing the baton to you to bring it forward, right? And what does leadership development look like in that aspect? And also being clear, what are the victories and the wins that we need in order to set them up like a relay race? You think about what's the point you need to get to, so that when you pass that baton, the next person is ahead, because this is a protracted struggle. So that's what I think about in terms of the personal preparation, the preparation for the organization and the movement at large. And how do we make sure that that is not ego driven, that it's impact driven, and that we are not just pushing for the transformation of the state, but the transformation of ourselves, for myself in the process.
Give thanks for that and those beautiful words and calling up your folks and your comrades from M4BL. I'm so appreciative for all of you. Lone from Rising Majority, Pakoya from Oakland Rising, Celeste from Movement for Black Lives, and our folks at Center for Third World Organizing for bringing us together in this conversation to explore what it means to win. And we know that on this day of Shut It Down for Palestine Day, that we will be victorious and our people in Palestine will be victorious from all world oppressions. So thank y'all for giving us a little bit of your love and your knowledge today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Karishi.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, you all. Wow.
Thank
Free
you.
Palestine.
Free Palestine.
Thanks so much. I hope that y'all out there, I hope y'all had your notebooks handy. I hope you had your pens handy. I hope that you were diligent students and took copious notes because there was so much encased in that panel that we just witnessed, right? I want to, one of the nuggets, there's so many that I'm mulling over, and I put some in the chat before, shouting folks out. But the one that I'm really holding right now is Lone's offering from Lorraine Hansberry, that I want to work and I want to love. I want to be in love. And I want to love myself, and I want to love my folks, right? And I want to love the world and the earth. And so just offering all of that. Thank you so much. I feel like if we can really break down some of those tools that they gave us, winning doesn't seem so impossible, right? Winning doesn't seem out of reach. I think that there was so many good tools that they gave us to win struggles, not just interpersonally and locally, but also nationally, right? In our regions. Like, there's so many ways globally there that if we can take some of those strategies that they gave us, that we are winning and we can continue to win. And be victorious. So with that, we're going to take a few minutes break so we can shift to these next panels. We have 2 simultaneous panels that are going to be happening. One of them is Global Connections. And we're going to talk about, many of these panels have said it, but the work that we do is not just national, but it's global, right? And we have allies and comrades throughout the world that are not only fighting alongside us, but are fighting their own in their own struggles as well, right? And so it's important to know where there's alignment. It's important to know what does a global world look like? What does allyship look like? What does connection look like? And then our other panel is racial justice. And man, both of these panels, I'm gonna be bouncing around. So you can be like me, you can bounce around, or you can look at one today and then go back later when it's online and watch the one you missed. But whatever you choose, it's going to be powerful. So we have those 2 panels, Global Connections and Racial Justice. And then we'll take a 15-minute break. And then we have 3 sessions that you can choose from. There's a radical art session that's a writing revolution. We have evolving and learning as you go. And we have how to build sustainable organizations, right? And so we have those. And so join us, go get your coffee, go use the bathroom real quick, and hop in one of these panels. See you on the flip side.